Goes to Arcane Season 2.
Goes to...
Yeah, this is a no-brainer.
Oh my god!
Are you serious? Are you?
Howard goes up there, he's like, oh yeah, I didn't even have to make a game this year.
Wait, she was gonna win either way. She was gonna win either way.
Dog.
Dude, I'm honestly shocked.
Are y'all fucking retarded? What the fuck is that, bro?
Stop.
Hello there guys and welcome back. This is the second and final part of my critique of the Fallout show and its failure to be faithful to the franchise's lore. This video assumes you've seen the first part, so if you haven't, I would really go check that out first. You back? Good. Let's get started. I want to start by adding some stuff I forgot or didn't even think about from part 1. I find it weird that the Brother of Seal's flag in the show bears so much resemblance to the US flag, since as I explained in the last video, they defected from the US due to what the country has become. It's be like if the US based their flag off the British empires, even though we fought to free ourselves from them. That doesn't make a large amount of sense. Speaking of the US flag, it looks like the show used the regular US flag in this shot next to the Brotherhood's, even though that's not what the flag looks like in Fallout, because the US eventually divided to 13 Commonwealths, which is why there's 13 stars to represent that. And as of this intro is just going to be discussing flags, during the chalkboard scene I talked about, where Lucy unveils the NCR flag, they play the wrong theme. That's the Fallout 4 theme, the intro, a game with almost nothing to do with the NCR. They even mess this up in the next episode when we see the NCR Ranger armor worn by these scavengers. People on YouTube can get this right. So many amateur editors on YouTube can get this right, but not the multi-million-dollar show. This inspires a lot of confidence that they can't get basic details like this right. But then again, they also couldn't get the dates correct, as I discussed the last time, so I won't repeat myself there. I also realized that the guys Max punches in episode 7 when he tries to save Lucy from them due to the misunderstanding should be dead due to how strong it is. Still, once again, the power armor can't remain consistent to save the show's life, so this is just the norm for the show. Those are just additions I wanted to include to make my case against the show as airtight as possible because, unlike Jonathan Nolan and the rest of the writers and showrunners, I care about the details, unlike what some other people try to tell you, so I decided to start this video off with that. If you have any other tidbits you'd like to add from both videos, put them in the comment section because I want to be as inclusive as possible to make my case as strong as possible. But I will repeat myself on one thing. If you like this show, that is totally fine. I don't care if you like or dislike something. What I care about is discussing quality, not putting other people's enjoyment down. But suppose your response to the short video series is that I'm treating people like they're wrong for enjoying the show because I didn't get what I wanted as a fan. In that case, that puts a massive insecurity on your part that you can't handle something being criticized just because you like it. Criticism isn't inherently toxic, such things some people will say when trying to talk about the show. It can be a good thing when done well. And if the show is actually good, it will be able to stand up to scrutiny. And just because I criticize it, it's not because I personally didn't get what I wanted as a fan. It's simply expecting good writing consistency with previous lore and stories as fan entitlement, and I hope you don't like anything that does the same thing this show does, such as the Star Wars sequel trilogy, because that type of defense can be easily used against you. As fans or consumers, we have every right to criticize something if it doesn't respect what came before. To claim it's just fan entitlement, that you're just a New Vegas or Obsidian fanboy for claiming the show isn't good, it's a mindset that needs to die since that's the main tactic that I've seen many people use online to defend the show at all costs. Are there people like that? Absolutely. Does the show get a free pass?
No.
That is nothing more than a cheap gaslighting tactic that shows that you don't care about having an honest conversation, but just seek to validate your stance through bad faith defensive tactics. I discuss this more towards the end because the conclusion will be pretty long. So without wasting any more of your time, let's dive straight into this. To start with one of the most vital aspects of Fallout's lore, the Vault Tech is the company responsible for the existence of the vaults, hence the name. They cooperated with the US government to create the vaults to save what people they could from the oncoming nuclear holocaust. Still, at the same time, the vaults were used as social experiments to test whether the inhabitants could survive the new world. The layer games, even New Vegas, I am criticizing that game for this since it does it too, for making them also scientific experiments, where in Fallout 2, they were only decided to be more social ones. Vault-Tec is one of the most evil entities in the entire series, and that was what's so cool about them, was their mysteriousness. All we knew about Vault-Tec was just information passed down from terminal entries and other optional pieces of lore, and that was what was really cool about it. It made them scary in a way to see what their experiments have done to so many residents of the vaults. It added a lot of world building and intrigue to the series. But as usual for this show, they had to ruin all of that by exploring Vault-Tec as much as possible. And not only that, they didn't just ruin Vault-Tec, they had to undermine the entire franchise and the core message of the whole series to facilitate their anti-capitalist agenda. This scene is so horrible that if I had to try to dissect it myself, I would dive into brain rot and actual retardation. But thankfully my friend, Enclave Emily, you might remember from the previous video, already discussed this in her video about the show, which I highly recommend. She allowed me to use this clip for my video. And without further ado, I'm going to let her divulge why this scene is the worst in the entire history of this franchise.
Anyway, the meeting is a generic capitalism evil meeting where they're discussing how peace talks between China and America have set them back on their goals. This is despite the fact that we already know that a lot of the CEOs of these companies in the games are supposed to not want a war to happen, Vault-Tec being the one excluded. Because of course they had to bastardize some of the most recognizable names in Fallout, just for the sake of their capitalism evil message. Anyway, they actually start humoring the idea of what it would be like after the end of the world, and how they could profit from it. And the CEO of West-Tec actually makes a very good point that people could just very much still be alive after the people in the vaults come out. Also putting forth the idea that a lot of the people who survive might just be Stone Age creatures, who will kill anyone on sight. To which Bud responds with, time is the ultimate apex predator. No, Bud. Time is effectively a guarantee that society will begin to reorganize and that this plan would fail fucking immediately. Dumb fucking messaging of these writers wasn't obvious enough. Bud has to say that time is how they'll win the great game of capitalism. This, thankfully, starts to be questioned by every single CEO, saying that he's not addressing any of the points and that this is downright retarded. Barbara interjects, and for a moment it feels like this show's gonna actually have some good writing, until you realize she's actually defending the idea of the vaults continuing, which means that, of course, she's still on board with the war continuing, to the point where everybody else gets nuked, even though she has an active fucking incentive not to want that to be the case. Her daughter Janie, which she brings up in this exact scene, and I want you to remember this for just a moment, she says that they have hundreds of vaults that each of the CEOs can claim as their own because the spirit of competition is what made their companies great. Just keep that in mind, because I feel like I'm about to explode like a fucking hydrogen bomb. This idea of each CEO being able to claim dozens of vaults as their own is apparently enough to get them all on board with the idea of vaults, and they start proposing experiments which make absolutely no fucking sense. The CEO of Big Mountain, which is supposed to be a scientist's paradise, suggests a vault where people compete to survive inside it, which is just dumb, and feels like whoever wrote this just read the summary of the summary of the summary to what Big Mountain was supposed to be. How anyone takes this shit seriously is fucking ridiculous. There is no possibility to make money in the end of the world because the money is gone. The customers are gone. The resources are gone. A lot of the services a lot of people enjoy nowadays are gone. You can't sell people Funko Pops and a gaming console and a big flat screen TV in the end of the world if that consumer is more concerned about not dying from radioactive poisoning, you fucking idiots. This is a Reddit communist's understanding of what capitalism is. Oh, but that's okay because it was the Chinese that dropped the nuclear bombs, not Vault-Tec. They wouldn't retcon that now, would they? Barbara opens up that black hole of a mouth she has again and says that the end of the world is an opportunity because then there'll be no one to fight except each other, you fucking idiot. The spirit of competition is what made these companies great, yet here they are talking about how there will be no competition when the entire point of this experiment is that they will compete with one another. Vault-Tec will compete with House. House will compete with Big Mountain. Big Mountain will compete with Repcon. Repcon will compete with West-Tec. And then she says that they'll drop the bombs themselves. So yes, lovely, they just retconned every single fucking Fallout game. Because Fallout, in case you haven't haven't realized that this entire fucking time is about dealing with the fallout of the consequences of humanity's actions. So the whole point as to why the Brotherhood of Steel, that faction that Bethesda really fucking loves, exists, the whole point of the franchise and its themes, all gone. All fucking gone, because these writers want to spit on the franchise that was infinitely better written than anything they could come up with, and also partially because they wanted to shove their stupid fucking modern politics into it, and because they don't understand anything they're actually writing. And of course, the thrice lobotomized seals that defend this show think, oh, it's a critique of capitalism. That's actually really in line with the games. Because they're too fucking brain rotten to understand these very simple concepts. Because they can't leave their stupid modern politics aside for a second and think of things. Critiquing capitalism is actually very fucking easy, and the writing of this show makes it look outright impossible. Because this show is so dumb, the writers who want to critique capitalism want me to believe that the capitalists want the capital to be gone. How the fuck is anyone defending this shit? How the fuck does anyone think this is actually appropriate?
So Emily did a good job explaining why the play made no sense from the get-go. Still, I have some things to add to it myself, but just not as much as her video. Retconning the entire reasoning for a war to happen harms not only the lore to a catastrophic level, but also thematically as well. To start with the lore, as Emily already alluded to, China started the war. China was the one to shoot the first nukes. It was kept a mystery before, but there have been some hints and outright confirmations that they were responsible. To start, there's the line from President Dick Richardson from Fallout 2.
You really don't know, do you? Let me tell you about mankind's salvation. A little history first. There was a great war, long before we were born. Our gallant soldiers fought from the Yukon to the Yangtze. We were winning, too. And then those damn Reds launched. We barely got our birds up. Well, no, it didn't. But at least it knocked the damn Red Menace back into the Stone Age.
Some might claim that he's a biased source, but even if we are to dismiss him, there are other pieces of evidence, such as Anchorage, Alaska, was liberated from China on October 22nd, 2077, just one day before the war happens. The implication is obvious. Having suffered a massive loss from taking the only large oil reserve in the world, China says, okay, we give up, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Then proceeds to nuke America the following day. We have Fallout 4, where a Chinese submarine inhabited by the ghoul Chinese crewmen, and when speaking with the Captain Zhao, the player can say this to him.
You can go to hell. You're part of the enemy that destroyed my country.
That is... unfortunate. Bu Xing. I hoped that after 200 years, we could forget past hatred.
Notice how he doesn't try to push back against being responsible for starting the war and destroying Boston specifically. He admits to the deed. There's also the Shi, who descended from their sub's Chinese crewmen stationed outside San Francisco. I believe there's a terminal entry in 4 that also confirms this. Since people like to use outside interviews from Todd Howard to defend the show, let's also use Tim Kane's interview in which he confirms that China is the culprit.
It is confirmed in multiple games and by the original game's creators that China nuked America first.
Do you see how easy it is to use your tactics against you? Hope you remain consistent and say that's outside the show so it doesn't count, since people like to use that to defend it. So by this point, the evidence is stacked in one direction. I would have preferred that they stay entirely mysterious, even as far back as 2, but it is what it is. Vault-Tec causing the war is an apparent contradiction. I've heard the argument that it's supposed to be ambiguous since we don't actually see them launch the nukes, so it could still be China first. First off, China's never mentioned by name in the entire show. All they're referred to is the Reds, which can mean any other country for those who don't know the games, because the show doesn't want to mention them by name, because they will likely result in the show not being able to be screened in China due to how harsh the regulations are for foreign entertainment. Kind of ironic how this show critiques capitalism, but at the same time they try to avoid pissing off the largest country in the world so that they could profit off that capitalism from them. And the show still very clearly wants us to believe that it's Vault-Tec due to some lines from both Moldaver and Bud.
Shady Sands.
She's lying. Lucy.
That's how Vault-Tec deals with competition. Just like they did 200 years ago.
They're super managers. People with positivity. People who make lemonade. People who will inherit the earth after we've wiped the surface clean.
The fact is that it's utterly uncontested within the show that it paints the picture that Vault-Tec is responsible. This plan is so brain-dead stupid, the fact that this is the inciting incident for the entire franchise makes this by far the worst retcon in the whole show and in Bethesda's Fallout. This completely undermines the theme of the entire series about war, how we as human beings have always had war as our nature as a means to gain power and resources, and how we routinely cause our own death and destruction. We, as a species, the primary caretakers of Earth, failed.
War. War never changes. The Romans waged war to gather slaves and wealth. Spain built an empire from its lust for gold and territory. Hitler shaped a battered Germany into an economic superpower. But war never changes. In the 21st century, war was still waged over the resources that could be acquired. Only this time, the spoils of war were also its weapons. Petroleum and uranium.
Now the whole message is swept away for the strawman capitalism bad guys that is so cartoonish it's downright insulting. And don't say this is satire, because this is the laziest possible way to write satire. Fallout used to be so nuanced with its themes, at least in the originals and New Vegas, that they've never been required to use these clear strawmen to make their points. Now this is the primary message of the franchise. Some might say that Fallout has always had warnings of capitalism messaging in it, which is valid to a certain extent, but as Chris Avellone himself puts it very well, it's never been the primary message of the series. It was war. The show has to ruin everything by incorporating the tagline into its messages.
And war, well, war never changes.
And now I'm about to blow my fucking brains out!
As if all this wasn't bad enough, this thing assassinates two key characters from New Vegas. Let's start with Mr. Robert Edwin House. In New Vegas, House is one of the 4 main faction paths to choose to take complete control over the Mojave Wasteland. He's been around ever since the war, when he was the founder of Robco and became wealthy from the Enterprise almost instantly. But when the state of the world was getting worse, he predicted that the war was going to end itself, so thus he created a Platinum Chip, the MacGuffin plot device that instigates the main plot for New Vegas, since your character, the Courier, is the one who's supposed to deliver it to him until Benny disrupts that delivery. He has goals to rebuild humanity by making New Vegas into an economic superpower and to migrate to the source to find a plan to start a new beginning.
It was a place of splendor. As magnificent as today's strip may seem, it's but a shadow of the neon paradise that was Las Vegas. I grew up not far from here, and though I traveled the old world extensively, I never found another place like it. By 2065, I deemed it a mathematical certainty that an atomic war would devastate the Earth within 15 years. Every projection I ran confirmed it. I knew I couldn't save the world, nor did I care to, but I could save Vegas, and in the process, perhaps save mankind. I set to work immediately. I thought I had plenty of time to prepare. As it turned out, I was 20 hours short. On the day of the Great War, 77 atomic warheads targeted Las Vegas and its surrounding areas. My networked mainframes were able to predict and force transmit disarm code subsets to 59 warheads, neutralizing them before impact. Laser cannons mounted on the roof of the Lucky 38 destroyed another 9 warheads. The rest got through, though none hit the city itself. A suboptimal performance, admittedly. If only the Platinum Chip had arrived a day sooner. The Platinum Chip was printed in Sunnyvale, California on October 22nd, 2077, the day before the Great War. It was to have been delivered by courier the following afternoon, but by then, the world had ended. The chip contained vital software upgrades, but not just for my Securitrons. Every aspect of the missile defense grid would have been upgraded too. Given that I had to make do with buggy software, the outcome could have been worse. I nearly died as it was. Software glitches set off a cascade of system crashes. I had to take the Lucky 38's reactor offline, lest it melt down. For nearly 5 years, I battled power outages and more system crashes until I finally managed to reboot my data core with an older version of the OS. I spent the next few decades in a veritable coma. But I survived, obviously, and eventually thrived. With all that money pouring in, give me 20 years and I'll reignite the high technology development sectors. 50 years and I'll have people in orbit. 100 years and my colony ships will be heading for the stars to search for planets unpolluted by the wrath and folly of a bygone generation.
He's not an altruist or anything like that, but he does care about humanity. This makes him a viable candidate for running Mojave, and he's a favorite choice for many people. Well, this show strips of all nuance and just turns him into a stereotypical greedy businessman who wants to nuke the world for profit.
A lot of earning potential with the end of the world. But we're talking about making a significant investment based on a hypothetical. How can you guarantee results?
Not only does this make him a cretin for believing that this plan is actually viable in the slightest, it completely contradicts what he says from New Vegas about how he planned to save humanity by predicting the world will end itself because he ultimately cares about the human race. I've seen people try to defend this by claiming that House is lying, that he's a sweet talker trying to hide his true motives and past actions, but not even that makes sense. Nothing about New Vegas ever implies this. In fact, from what we see and hear, he's sincere and a man of his word. Take a look at his ending if you side with him.
Vegas will be a shining jewel in the middle of the desert, an oasis of light, a beacon to show mankind the way to the stars. This is just the start, you see. This is where it all begins.
And so the courier who had cheated death in the cemetery outside Goodsprings cheated death once again, and the Mojave wasteland was forever changed. Mr. House's Securitron army took control of Hoover Dam and the Strip, pushing both the Legion and the exhausted NCR out of New Vegas. Mr. House continued to run New Vegas his way, a despotic vision of pre-war glory. The streets were orderly, efficient, cold. New Vegas continued to be the sole place in the wasteland where fortunes were won and lost in the blink of an eye. The courier, fair and kind-hearted to those in the wasteland, ensured that Mr. House would keep New Vegas stable and secure for future generations. Mr. House afforded him every luxury at his disposal in the Lucky 38, out of gratitude and a quiet sense of pride for his choice in lieutenants.
He does so even when he has all the power and resources to do whatever he wants, including not following through on his promises, but he honors his word, strives to accomplish his goals, and honors his agreement with the courier, making him his protege and giving him whatever he wants. And while he wanted to make a profit by ending the world, by the time he was 30, he was a billionaire 30 times over. He has all the wealth any man could ever want. Well, if you're one of the show's writers, you think every wealthy person is a cartoonishly evil psychopath. I've heard some people try to twist this "I don't care to save the world" line to try and make it seem so it matches with the show, but that's a misread of the subtext. He's not saying that because he could save the world but chose not to, but rather because he doesn't have the means, even with all the resources he had at his disposal. New Vegas was the only place he could even save, even with the chip, but due to not arriving on time, he had to defend what he had and barely succeeded. And even then, he was stuck in a coma for several decades because of it. He wouldn't even have to do that if he just coordinated Vault-Tec to have a planned date for when they plan to drop the bombs. That would require intelligence, which this show has, at best, a 2 in. Some will argue that he was going behind their backs, but why would he openly support them in their idea to end the world if that was his plan? That's completely counterintuitive. If he were smart, he would tell him why it's a bad idea to nuke the entire capital, i.e. your entire customer base, renewing wealth meaningless. Well, I'm not harping on that anymore. This makes him the objectively worst option in New Vegas now. If he's willing to sell out humanity for profit, what's going to prevent him from doing that again? Now, even Caesar's Legion, an empire that practices slavery and murders en masse, and yes men, an option that has no official leader and can easily result in anarchy, are objectively better than him now. Absolutely amazing. Best adaptation my ass. But onto the second character assassinating this scene, which I don't see as many people discuss, Frederick Sinclair for the New Vegas DLC, Dead Money. For starters, he's now double the age and weight compared to what we see of him from the posters in the game. They might have changed him to differentiate him from House, make it easier to tell him apart, but that's not an excuse. Onto his actual character, he, much like House and everybody else in the room, stupidly agrees with his plan to end the world, but he also makes suggestions for experiments for the vaults.
We could intentionally overcrowd a vault so people have to compete to survive inside it.
But if you've played and paid attention to the DLC, you'll know that he will never do this. He created a Sierra Madre and surrounding village to protect the people he loves, particularly Vera Keyes, an actress he fell for when Dean Domino introduced them, who had planned to take everything Sinclair had because he was jealous of him. Vera was initially on this too, but eventually confessed to Sinclair what was boiling. He was initially furious and betrayed by this, and planned to set a trap for them when they tried to take his gold from the vault that he had at the heart of the casino.
Vera, if you're reading this, I know what you and Dean had planned to do tonight on the eve of the gala event. I loved you very much, and whatever possessed you to choose Dean's arm over my hand is beyond me. Whether it was greed or lust, it has led you here, and will forever keep us apart. I hope it leaves you as empty as you left me. As much as you sought what's inside the Sierra Madre, now it will keep you. The door has sealed. The elevator has left, and not even your voice will unlock it. This casino was my gift to you, and you will now be its heart for all time. Sincerely, Frederick Sinclair.
However, he eventually changes his mind because he still loves Vera, and despite her not fully loving him, still allows her to avoid the trap.
To Vera. Vera, if you're reading this, my fears have come to pass, and this is an apology. I hope you realize what my last words meant to you. If so, they've led you here, and this place will keep you safe.
In his final attempt to rewire the systems for the pipes, he gets poisoned by these cloud gases that they vent, and he dies. So, for those of you watching, I bet you can guess why this conflicts with his character. By being complicit in stirring the war, he is actively putting the people he cares about, especially Vera, at risk of dying from it. He built a Madre to protect the people in case the worst happens, i.e. the last resort. And when the war does occur, the bombs end up causing malfunctions to a hologram defense technology he acquired. They end up murdering everyone inside. Vera is trapped in a room, no means to escape, which leads to her suicide.
I can't believe you committed suicide. I cannot believe you committed suicide. How could you have done this? How could you have committed suicide?
You leave me here. Why? Sinclair! Sinclair! I'm going to die here, amongst the ghosts. I'm still being recorded by the holographic system. I came so far to be here. Now I just want to leave. Please. Let me leave. We all pay for what we've done. I'm so sorry, Sinclair. Sorry, I should have trusted you. Let go. Let go of what? Sinclair? Sinclair, where did you go? Why did you leave me here? Why? Sinclair! Sinclair! The doors. They sealed. I can hear the other guests screaming to be let out.
This is all Sinclair's fault now. He is now responsible for all the deaths of people he cares about, all for profit, even though he was perfectly willing to put all of his finances into the Madre to accomplish his goals. I've seen someone try to defend this by claiming that Sinclair was complicit in the suffering of workers to construct the villa, but this is false. When you look further into it, if you read several of the terminals from Dead Money and Oral Blues, it's heavily implied that he had no idea what was truly happening. The Big MT was performing unethical experiments under his nose, and he never noticed. So him being a representative of Big MT is also an issue since he was a client, not a CEO or an executive of the company. Yet the game also describes him as being very kind-hearted and optimistic, to the point where Dean was so fed up with it, being so narcissistic himself, that he thought that Sinclair believed that he was better than Dean, which is why he attempted to plunder everything Sinclair had left.
Knows the book. All high and mighty, lording it over everyone, acting so self-righteous, like nothing could touch him. He was the one with the problem. Never got mad at anything, nothing seemed to shake him. Even after his life kept getting dragged through the dirt. Always kept looking for the bright, shining future in everything. So, I decided to take everything from him.
Now he's just a fat, gritty businessman with no nuance whatsoever anymore. His story from DLC has been ruined now, all from a company that's billions, if not even $1 trillion+. This scene is an absolute disaster on every level. and it single-handedly makes this episode a 1 out of 10, and ruins so much about the franchise, and the fact that this scene in the show is so defended is honestly sad that so many people simp for such a low-quality show. This is honestly just embarrassing. I've already talked about the faults in the previous section. Their purpose on the surface is to simply protect enough people so that way they can rebuild the world after the surface is clear enough for them to avoid radiation hazards. This is true for some faults referred to as control faults, such as Fault 13 from Fallout 1. However, most of the vaults have some sort of unethical experiment to determine that inhabitants are fit to survive in the new world. There have been several interesting ones in this series, such as Fault 11 New Vegas. If you know about that one, look it up, it's fascinating. But much like everything in the series, they have to create problems, so let's go through a few. To start with some minor stuff that's not the most important in the grand scheme of things, more terrible jokes and dialogue contradicting world building.
Partner. At least one I'm not related to. And we have rules about that for a reason. Oh gosh. After 10 years of cousin stuff, I'm definitely excited for the real thing. We all know that, Jet. Messing around with your cousin, it's all well and good for kids, but it's not a sustainable long-term sexual practice, you know?
This doesn't make any sense if you think about it. Vaults have the usual population of 1,000 people. For one being able to gather online, a population of that size can last for a long time. That's way longer than just the 219 years that these people have been in the vault. Even in Fallout 3, which takes place 19 years before the show, he said that they have enough genetic diversity to last for a few more generations. So I don't see why in this show they must resort to cousin fiddling.
Hey Brandine, the kids just got a new playhouse.
Cletus, you are the most wonderful husband and son I ever had.
This is not even particularly funny, and it doesn't even make sense. Especially since they showed that they exchange people from the other vaults every 3 years, so this shouldn't really be an issue. Though the show contradicting lore just to make dumb sex jokes isn't anything new for this show. Also, as I pointed out in episode 1 review, the vaults now have non-lethal dart guns. Not only does it look out of place with the rest of Fallout's guns, but it could have been pretty helpful in Fallout 3 for the security forces to take the lone wanderer alive for questioning. I've had someone tell me that's a nitpick, but I disagree since, for all we know, that could have been the determining factor for the guards to win that situation. We see Fallout use fusion cores as their primary power sources, and that's never been a thing before. In one episode, they claim that the water ship is broken. It's played to be a significant issue, but they don't for some reason just replace it with another one. They couldn't in Fallout 13 back in Fallout 1 because in 2 it's confirmed that all the vaults have backup chips. But due to a shipping error, the spare chips were brought to Fallout 8 instead of 13, so they had no spares. But the show has no context as to why that's the case here. It ends up being pointless anyway because once a vault migrates to Fallout 32, they can just trade water, so it's done for nothing more than a cheap reference instead of anything of substance. There's quite a bit to say about the more significant stuff. To get back to the Vault-Tec scene, there appears to be some vaults in Canada and Mexico, which is a lore violation since Vault-Tec only makes deals with the United States government. Part of their moronic-ass plan is that most of them are in the cryogenic pods in Vault 31, which freezes them and protects them from the war and to wait out the apocalypse until it's time for them to rebuild the world in their own image. This contradicts the purpose of Fallout 111 in Fallout 4, since that vault is to see if cryogenics is even viable. However, the biggest problem with how Vault-Tec relates to the vaults is that while they allowed them to rebuild and create their own factions with their goal to end competition to win the game of capitalism. As I played in the last section, Moldaver claims that Hank nuked the vault to deal with the competition. Well, he wouldn't even have to do that if they didn't give him the means to become competitive, because the NCR's ancestry originates from Vault 15, and the purpose of that vault is to have a population of multiple different ideologies to gain interactions and potential failures. So they plan to eliminate competition, but simultaneously create vaults where the experiments foster competition? Don't you see how counteractive that is? Several central and minor factions originate from the vaults, so this plan is only getting progressively worse the more you digest the information. And it's only going to get worse! I mentioned this in the previous videos, but the show fails to account for the Master and his Super Mutant Army. I already talked about how they should have cracked Vaults 13 and 15 due to the location change, pushing Shea Sands, and likely their vaults, to their headquarters in the Boneyard, which makes up the ruins of Los Angeles. But this show adds 4 vaults that should have been added to the Master's hit list. There's the Vault Triumvirate, 31, 32, and 33, that's located in Santa Monica Pier, and as you should know, that's in LA. So the Master would crack those since they're basically in his backyard, but the show, of course, has to make the best villain in the franchise into a moron now. The Vault residents are right for the taking since they're not exposed to radiation, which the Master wants since they'll result in the intelligent super mutants instead of the dumb ones. Since this includes Vault 31, the Vault Vault-Tec is in, they should have been taken too, meaning their plan falls apart then and there. And this isn't even the last time I bring them up either. Oh my god, I hate this show. And yeah, Fallout 4 should have been taken as well, because I would bet that the Master would be very interested in experimenting with them with the FEV. After all, most of them are already mutants, similar to how he experiments on his followers to turn them into psychers like himself. The show continues to ruin more and more aspects of the franchise, to the point where Fallout 1 and 2's plots are completely broken now. This show is just so great, isn't it? The Enclave is one of the main antagonistic factions of the franchise, being the main villains of Fallouts 2 and 3. Being comprised of remnants of the United States government and military, they seek to retake America from the mutants, including humans that have been tainted with radiation. For a long time, they operated from the shadows from Poseidon oil rig, and they monitored the vaults. An important fact to remember for later, where they ordered vaults to open up and start rebuilding. Take Vault 8 building Vault C, for example. They are very cruel, to the point where they aren't afraid to gun down families, including children. They seek domination of the United States so that once again the country become the world's policeman. They take heavy losses in Fallout 2, losing most of their high personnel, including the President and Vice President. In New Vegas, there's a side quest if you get to know Arcade Gannon, whose father was a member of Enclave until he died when they lost Navarro to the NCR, and they gather members of his old squad, who at this point, 4 years after losing everything, they moved on now and have lives of their own. Most of them don't even agree with the Enclave anymore, now that they're gone, and now they're just all regular people, which humanizes them and the faction as a whole, which we got a little bit from Fallout 2. Bethesda screws this up again by having them return in Fallout 3 as the main villains despite taking massive losses. They're really stupid now with Colonel Autumn not being a threatening or interesting villain in the slightest, and their Zack's computer president Eden blowing himself up just after 3 lines of player's dialogue. And now despite their losses in 3, they're just back again. Especially doesn't make sense now because their show is set in California. You know, they suffered their greatest loss about 55 years ago now. Now all of a sudden they're just back? Well, considering Bethesda added to Fallout 4 the next gen patch, I shouldn't be surprised. They, the Super Mutants, and the Brotherhood must be in every Fallout property now, and I know that's not canon, but it's irritating that we have to see them constantly. They showed the hand from the body of a Super Mutant, and they'll certainly probably be in the next season too. Yay. Also, the Enclave after episode 2 never shows up or is mentioned again, so they almost wound up being pointless this season. They may play a more significant role in season 2, but if they don't, this is all we see of them. One of the rewrites that wills it comes from like the Institute or just some other faction. You have to explain how he made it from Boston, but it's possible since Zimmerman and 3 made it to DC, especially since the Institute had teleportation technology, so as long as the explanation makes sense, I will be fine with it. However, I have another issue with the Enclave concerning the show, and it's a big one. Relating once again to Vault-Tec, the Enclave used Project Safe House, which means they worked with Vault-Tec on social experiments of all the vaults, where they monitored the status of each of them, including the ordinary controlled ones. This allowed them to communicate with the vaults like how they did with Vault 8, which is how they constructed Vault City. So, why is this a problem? If we leave both Fallout 2 in the show, that means that the Vault-Tec was planning to start the war and house all their personnel in Fallout 31, even though the Enclave can monitor every vault. This means they're essentially trying to overthrow the government, even though the government be able to monitor them because they'll know what they're doing. So before they're Fallen 2, the Enclave should be kicking down their vault door and stopping their plans, which they have over 150 years to do. This makes Vault-Tec's plan even more broken. Both the Super Mutants and the Enclave should have put a stop to them long before the show ever takes place. Now, everyone in the Fallout franchise is so goddamn stupid to make this retarded ass plan come to fruition. Anyone who has watched these 2 videos this far still claims that this show is well written to any degree better have a college thesis prepared to convince me, because the more you look into the show, the worse and worse this gets. Todd Howard and Amazon, from the bottom of my heart.
Fuck you!
Alright, the last section before the conclusion would contain any lore issues my friends and I found while watching or researching this show that don't fit into any previous sections. Still, I didn't want to leave them out, so I made a dedicated section discussing them. To start, I wonder how exactly Lee Mulder was still alive if somehow the same age as she was pre-war. I've seen someone try to argue that she could use cryogenics, but from what I can tell, only Vault-Tec has the ability, since I don't recall any instance of that being the case outside Mothership Zeta 3, but I doubt that Mulder is supposed to be a space alien. Plus, that's just headcanon because the show never elaborates on this, and since she dies in the finale, Cycling will never get any elaboration. Another issue relating to her is that she is apparently the creator of Cold Fusion. Originally, Cold Fusion was something that Vault-Tec created and used to power their Geks, to use them to start rebuilding when the inhabitants left the vaults to rebuild the wasteland. Take Vault City from Vault 8 for example. Sorry that they keep repeating that, but it's very important. But this treats Cold Fusion like it is a brand new invention from Mulder that she wasn't able to get started until the end of the finale, which for some reason requires a code from Hank to get started despite that she's the inventor, and she should be able to get started herself when she gets the pill from Wilzig. I get they want to reference the release date of Fallout 1 with the code, and as repeating trend of the show, it sacrifices consistency or even making sense to contrive it to happen. Plus, let's not ignore how the city's lights regained their power even though the city was nuked twice. Why couldn't they rebuild the city with a Gek? Vault 4 is right there. All vaults, even the experimental ones, have them. Vault 8's computers and 2 confirm as much. There are also some problems with the Pip-Boys as well. For starters, the Geiger counters are inconsistent. Particularly in episode 1, where Lucy goes off when it's a decent distance away from Monty, which is how she figures out that he's from the surface. However, for some reason, none of the other Pip-Boys go off during the wedding and dinner scenes, even though several of the Vault 33 residents have them on. But they also have trackers now, which is a weird addition. As far as I can remember, it doesn't break anything, but it just seems out of place to me. And when Barb shows Cooper her Pip-Boy, it's the 3000 model instead of the 2001. The 2000 models are the standard issues pre-war, and the 3000 models were meant for the Vault Dwellers, but I guess the 2000s just don't exist now either. A few additional stuff that comes to mind is that Junk Jet is in California now, even though it should be in Boston since it's a weapon exclusively made there at Arctic Systems. When the man who invented it was going to use it to go on a murder spree against the co-workers due to how they treated him, that was cut 2 days short by the war, but since it's in California now, no explanation. As I said in the last video, this show has no sense of distance or geography. Speaking of junk, well, this whole show is junk, but you get the idea. The wasteland is littered with junk towns now, even though it's been 200 plus years, and they're still relying on these, even though they should have been done away with for at least several decades now. A problem with Bethesda Falls is that every town is just something from pre-war instead of building something new. Stagnation, essentially. They refuse to allow the series to grow past this Mad Max apocalypse, even though, as the creators of the originals have said before, the series is about rebuilding, growth, and change. So having everyone in the wasteland refusing to move on from the old world is the antithesis of that. No one's making anything new, and the show continues that trend. The Mr. Handy robots also seem to require power cores now, but just like the Vaults, this is wrong since they have their own fuel as a power source. We see the Fiends in episode 5, which I'm not sure if they made there from New Vegas, since they exclusively reside there in Vault 3. Plus the show claims they're cannibals now, even though they're not. They're just drug addicts. Honestly, at the end of the show, after Hank flees from the battle, we see him make his way to New Vegas itself. And they got it all wrong as well. They omit several buildings and other locations surrounding the city, such as Camp McCarran, along several dilapidated buildings. And that is everything I could find that the show contradicts. The amount of lore issues in the show are just staggering, ranging from the small and overall insignificant to the core fundamentals. Almost nothing in the show is left unscathed. Several characters are either damaged or flat out ruined. The distance and locations of areas are flat out ignored. Objective, indisputable facts are blatantly contradicted. Factions have either been destroyed off-screen with no interesting development as they got there, or completely altered. Several massive plot holes have now been generated. Everything's inconsistent now, and now it's finally time to bring this discussion to a close. So, for the conclusion, we're doing something a little different this time. I'm not going to have this scripted or anything like that, since I kind of just want to express myself in a kind of a different format, or just in a different way, because I just have so much to say, and I've just been so driven to just making these videos for a while now, that I just want to just fully express myself in just the most legitimate way I see fit. Like, obviously, as you can tell, I do not like this show. Like, barely at all. Like, this show, I mean, it's just, I just don't even know what to really just say fully, just to be honest. It's just, this show's just so bad, but yet, everybody's been praising it. Like, ever since the show first came out, it's been praised to the high heavens, and like, it's barely had any real criticism or pushback. Not to say there hasn't been none, but the negativity is far, far skewed by the positivity. And that's just some reason why I wanted to make my videos. Like, particularly when I made that episode 1 video several months back when the show was still fresh. Though that was just kind of the issue for me, because that was back when it was fresh and everybody was just gushing over it, saying, "Oh, it's so good. It's like the best thing ever. You're just a hater, man." It's just like, I don't want to hate something just to be a contrarian or anything like that, as opposed to what some commenters will try to tell you. I just hated it because of what it does to the lore, and I think at this point I've already just made my peace on that. Like, this video series is almost like 2 hours long, like including both videos together. Oh god, it's just, this show just blatantly just does not care about the lore. Like, if you just actually think about it and analyze it like I have, you would just come to the same conclusion I did. It just blatantly doesn't care. And if you take a look at Bethesda's track record and history, like how I highlighted in the beginning of part 1, you will know why I come to that conclusion. Like, Pete Hines himself has said that they're not beholden to what people wrote 20 years ago. And for like the Elder Scrolls, that could be one thing because Bethesda themselves did create that franchise. But this is Fallout. This was created by Interplay, Black Isle, Tim Kaine, Chris Avellone, all of them. So just like the fact that they don't respect the lore and the stories that those games told, it's just really disrespectful to the much more talented people who created the series to begin with. It's just no different than how like Disney Star Wars treats the franchise and George Lucas's legacy. And just now, like, the legacy and just the perception of the series has been completely ruined now. And this is something I really wanted to talk about because I've had so much pushback against this, even people that I know that I've had in Discord calls that try and push back against this mentality, saying, oh, trying to like push back on how like I treat Bethesda, saying like, oh, it's childish, or that, no, Bethesda's done a good job, Bethesda's been really good for Fallout, they made it more popular than ever. And I'm like, is that really true though? Like, yeah, a lot of people know about the series because of them. The reason I say that is less because of like overall recognition, but perception. There is a difference. The way people perceive Fallout nowadays is just completely different to how it actually is and what it's meant to be. Like, I have several friends who have little to no experience with Fallout, outside like the show, for example. There's one friend of mine who made a video responding to a guy who claimed Fallout 4's RPG mechanics were alright or something like that. And he said how when he played Fallout 4, when he played the game, he just thought that Fallout was just this like black comedy like looter shooter. Like, he didn't believe that Fallout was just something that was meant to be taken seriously. But that like changed for him when he played New Vegas. He was like, oh wow, so Fallout is supposed to be kind of serious. And I have another friend who's never played Fallout who kind of told me the same thing. Like, he just thought it was just this lame, just post-apocalypse funland. And that's just exactly the problem. People don't think Fallout is serious. Because if you try to say Fallout used to be serious or like grounded or whatever, they try to just push back and just with the dumbest defenses and whataboutism. Like, you mentioned Fallout such as New Vegas was serious, and people just blow up the overall Blues penis feet joke, not realizing that it's coming from like a scientist who no longer has his body anymore, and now he's just a walking like or floating Geneva Convention violation. And overall Blues, despite being mostly pretty like silly a lot of the time, it still has a lot of like dark undertones to it if you like really think about it. It still has like serious aspects to it. It's not just a dumb mindless comedy like what this show tries to be most of the time. Like, the people who try to say Fallout was never serious also have just never played the originals. You can just blatantly tell they don't. Because they always just use a random encounter to try to prove the point. But A, those aren't canon, they're also optional, and they usually require a very high luck stat in order to just consistently see them. So you may just never see them on just a normal average playthrough if you don't like specialize in luck. I mean, sure, Fallout 2 did kind of go too far with like the special encounters, such as that one Monty Python reference and all of that. But at the same time, Fallout 2 is still mostly really serious. I mean, we're talking about a game that still has like a genocide that's almost about to happen, as well as just other like dark serious themes and other moments, such as like Myron, that kid who I talked about back in the first video. Well, he actually rapes you if you're a low intelligence female character. So like, just think about that. A teenage kid is completely willing to do that. Just let that sink in. You're gonna look at that and you're just gonna tell me that's meant to be a joke? I mean, oh my god. Now, I'm just sick of just this sort of historical revisionism that's gone with this franchise. I mean, it's been happening for years now. It's gotten especially bad ever since the show became popular. All the tourists are coming out and acting like they know the series when they truly don't. And yes, I'm not afraid to use the term tourist, because that's exactly what those people are. I mean, just look at it this way. Remember back when Godzilla Minus One came out and it was like really popular, even for people who weren't Godzilla fans? Well, then you had like the tourists of that like series coming out and acting like they knew Godzilla and they really didn't. Or they made some really like shitty videos trying to discuss about it. And that's exactly what's happening with the show, except at least Godzilla Minus One is good. Like, I love that movie to death, but this show isn't good. It's misleading people, and they think that this is how Fallout is now. I have like several friends, both online or in person, who've had like little to no experience with Fallout, who like love the show, and they think, oh yeah, so this is what Fallout is. And it's just like, ugh, no, this isn't. And I'm tired of how people who overinflate the dark comedy aspects to it. Is it in the original games in New Vegas? Sure. But nowhere near to the same extent I've seen people online and they try to like discuss the show. Like, there's just one really good like clip I found on Twitter. Like this guy who takes that one like recorded message from Ulysses when he met like the White Legs tribe, and he describes sort of like the whole like Flenderization of Fallout perfectly.
Campfire one night showed me how they changed themselves, how they wore their hair now. It was like my entire dead tribe in the firelight. Teeth grinning red in the dark. Eager corpses, blood-covered ghosts. They had taken my braids. The way of the twisted hairs, as if it showed they were like me, of me. While every knot in their braids spoke of raping, violence, and ignorance of what the knots meant. They thought to show respect. Defiled it. Lost myself in trying to read the braids they wove. When I remembered, they had put no meaning in it. They had no history of what it meant. They didn't even know the insult in the twists, knots. And the dry wells came rushing back. The White Legs circled like that. It was like looking at the dead of my tribe, reborn as ghosts, hateful, hungry, bowing to Caesar.
Like, as you can tell from the clip, it just talks about how like the franchise just like wears the skin of Fallout without understanding the actual meaning behind it. And that's just exactly what the problem with modern Fallout is nowadays. Like, Bethesda, they've never understood the franchise. They never had. Like, I remember there was this one video that, like, discussed about it. And there's just been plenty of other videos that talk about how they're just not, like, good on games as by themselves. And there's just especially not good Fallout games. Like, they've been stripping out the RPG mechanics more and more, where both 4 and 76 are basically just looter shooters with light RPG elements. They're not, like, proper Fallout games because they just fail to give a proper role-playing experience. I mean, at least 3 tried to be more RPG, even if it did dumb down or strip out some stuff itself. But that's just exactly what the problem is. Bethesda is just not good stewards of the franchise. And I'm so sick of people that keep trying to push back against that. Oh my god, it's just that I'm just so sick. I'm just very, very concerned about this whole future of the franchise now. Especially with the show being praised to hell and back. As well as also not to mention what's going to happen in other video game adaptations, in which they're probably just going to try following this show's footsteps of just being canon to like their game series, but just not understanding the lore. Like, it's just so unbelievable that people who criticize stuff such as like the Star Wars sequel trilogy, or his other like modern bad movies, shows, and games that just blatantly just disrespect the source material, give this show a pass. Just goes, oh, it's fun, or Fallout's just supposed to be a comedy. And I especially hate how this show is being compared to the best video game adaptations, such as like Arcane, Cyberpunk, Edgerunners, when the difference between those shows and this are night and day. And even if, let's say, Arcane Season 2 isn't as near as good as Season 1, like what I've heard it was, I still very highly doubt it's anywhere near as bad as this show. Like, Arcane just has so much better writing overall than what this show does. Like, it has interesting characters, world building, and it's like, it just respects, like, the audience. This show just doesn't. Like, there's a couple decent jokes, or just, and I did also kind of just like the Ghoul character. That's really just about it. That I really just liked about, like, the overall writing of the show. Like, none of the other characters are really interesting or, like, super well developed. Like, Maximus especially is just terrible. Like, how he's just really inconsistent with what he's supposed to be as, like, a brotherhood knight who was raised by them. But yet, sometimes he's just constantly fluctuating both competence and just his overall loyalty to them. Or Lucy, who's just very inconsistent herself, where she just flip-flops between naive Vault Dweller and just more serious and hardened, like, Wastelander. And it just constantly just flips on a dime depending on the situation. And I'm not going to go talk about this show in full depth about how it just fails such a show in of itself. I mean, I've already sprinkled some of those criticisms throughout the videos, but there's just other videos that go into it super well. Like Enclave Emily, like, her video on the Fallout show is just really good. But yet people just, like, shit on her videos, as well as just mine or other people criticize this show, because the show just has a rabid fan base that, like, if you just criticize just by a little bit, you're just called this toxic New Vegas fanboy who can't accept growth or change. But the problem is, as I talked about, Bethesda's Fallout just doesn't understand what growth and change actually is. They just want to be this Mad Max Apocalypse Forever till, like, the end of time. And it's just like, that's just what Fallout is now. And so, that's just very dark and depressing, honestly, that this is what this series has been reduced to now. And yet, everybody's just clamoring for it. And I just don't understand why. Like, the show, nor the Bethesda games have much merit, like, just at all. And I'm tired of people who keep trying to say it's just childish to trash on them when they just deserve it. Like, just take a look at New Vegas, just how good the writing is. Like, I've already talked about, like, how, like, good Kaiser is. Like, when I talk about the NCR, how he gives very compelling arguments as to why the NCR isn't good for the Mojave. But there's just, like, plenty of other really good characters and moments, such as, like, when you're with Boom, and he's just talking about his wartime PTSD, or, like, his experience with his wife, where he had to, like, put her down to avoid her being brought into slavery, and how he deals with that. Like, you as the player can push him to be better or worse as a person. Same thing with someone like Kaz, on whether or not she should take revenge against people who wronged her. Or with Veronica, whether or not she should stay with the Brotherhood or lead them, like, to go on her own. Like, or just, what was it, Lily, like, she also has a really good character arc, where, like, you have to determine how much medication she should take for the benefit of herself, for her overall health, or if she should just not take medication, that way she can remember her grandchildren. Like, or just remember, do you remember Joshua Graham and how great a character he is? And he's just one of the best, like, examples, like, Christian characters in media, especially, like, with his arc. If you try to, like, do his ending, like, just allow me to play, because it's amazing.
Him hear you. You talk. Don't listen to this thing. His cries are those of a mad beast caught in a thicket. He gave no mercy to my family, and I will give none to his. He has a debt to pay for what he's done, and I've come to collect. And so he's chosen to cower in the water like a dumb animal. I want to take from them what they took from me, from my family. In this life, I want them to suffer. I want all of them to die in fear and pain. I want to have my revenge against him, against Caesar. I want to call it my own, to make my anger God's anger, to justify the things I've done. Sometimes I tell myself that these wildfires never stop burning, but I'm the one who starts them, not God, not them. I can always see it in my mind, the warmth and the heat. It will always be a part of me. But not today. Go. Get out of here. Go back. Back to the Great Salt Lake.
Like, Fallout could be just so much better than this. Fallout had just something just really good characters and writing, especially both the originals and New Vegas. Like, the actual good Fallout games. Like, they are just good RPGs. They have good stories, good characters, good RPG mechanics, good level design, all of that. Like, people say Bethesda games are good, that's just mainly because I've seen, like, they praise Fallout 4, oh, it has really good gunplay. It's like, okay, does it have good anything else? Well, no, then the rest of the game isn't that good, especially RPG. Like, there's more to a game than just its combat. And people who keep trying to say, oh, they're good games, are really just saying that because those games appeal way more to FPS games, to like FPS players, than like RPG players. And so thus we RPG players are just alienated by the Bethesda games. And that's just the reason why I just do not accept Bethesda Fallout as canon. Because they just don't represent the franchise well. And what's funny is that they do try to have like serious storytelling. Like Fallout 3's main story is that you're trying to look for your dad, but you run to like the other major players involved with the world, and yet he dies sacrificing himself. And in the original ending Fallout 3, you die sacrificing yourself in his footsteps. And the game tries to make that like a thematic through line, but it fails miserably just due to how bad the writing is, how forced it is, that how you have to sacrifice yourself when there's like a million other options available. And even if, let's say, you take the DLC in consideration, you just send in like one of your companions in to fix the purifier, especially with those that are immune to radiation, the game calls you a coward because you don't sacrifice yourself for no reason. It's like, what? I'm the coward for dying when there's like other options? You know, the whole point of sacrifice is that somebody has to do it and there's no other options. Like, if there are other options, what makes a sacrifice worth it, you know? Or in Fallout 4, where you're just like a happy-go family man, but then the war comes and you're forced into the vaults, and like your wife or husband is murdered and your son is taken. But when you like look for him, you find out that he's the head of the very institute that captured him to begin with. And yet it's supposed to be this very sad, tragic ending where he dies from cancer, or when you're forced to like blow him up. It's like the game is still very clearly trying to have like serious story overall, but yet they're just really bad at doing it. Especially because they're not good at like balancing their tones between both this dark and serious aspects. So it's just how like plot hole ridden those stories are anyway. And like people just keep going above and beyond the fans every single aspect of the show. Like I mentioned how overused the music was back in when I broke down episode 1. And my friend who tried to like defend the show was like, well, you could just turn on the radio anytime the Bethesda games. When the thing they don't seem to understand is that A, those are completely optional, and there's also times when the games force the radio to be turned off, such as when you blow up the Institute at the end of 4. It's like, yeah, that does not work. Or like how he tried to say, I really like how these I don't want to see tomorrow in the finale because it ties in with the themes and all that. It's like, okay, maybe that might be good usage if they didn't spend it all the freaking time in the show. Especially in moments that are completely totally inappropriate, such as when a lot of people are dying during the wedding scene, or in episode 2 when Lucy investigates that one house that has that dead family in it, including those dead children's skeletons, the dead skeletons of those children. But yet she just walks out and it just immediately flashes to like music. It's like, that was so totally jarring when I saw it, that I was just completely taken out of the experience. Or in episode 5 when they have that tense confrontation with the fiends, but there's also music playing that just completely undermines that tone. It's just like, Fallout cannot be serious anymore. That's just a problem. It's basically the same issue like the MCU has, how it just can't be serious anymore, it has to undermine every single serious moment with a joke. This show is just basically just a bad MCU project. And that's basically all it is. That's just what Fallout has basically become. It honestly makes me worried about the overall future of the franchise. And I'm just like, so how have we come to this? How is this the franchise as we know it nowadays? Yeah, we have people like Actman and Elvis the Alien who tried to defend this show on the lore ban. At least it's not Halo. It's like, I don't care. Just because the show may not be as bad as Halo, which it could honestly be even worse, considering the fact it is canon, but yet you're trying to defend the saying, well, at least try to follow the lore. Like, okay, if you failed at following the lore this hard, you might as well just not even bother trying at all. Like, this is just pathetic. This is terrible. And yet, someone like Ackman keeps trying to, like, sometimes he was a little bit scholarly about how, like, the Fallout show is, like, better than Arcane just because it's not an adaptation of League of Legends. Well, guess what? League of Legends at least gave us this fantastic show, which is way better than Fallout in every single regard. So I'm sorry, but you do not get to brag about how good Fallout is when Arcane exists. And this is just what I just do not like. The amount of people who defend this show, and it's just so irritating that this is what the franchise is now. And honestly, if this is what Fallout is, I don't want any part of it. I have no interest in, like, whatever game that comes up, especially if it's made by Bethesda. And honestly, it's kind of as they once said in Dead Money. The hard part isn't finding it, it's letting go. And honestly, I do think I am going to have to let go of this franchise. No, I still do love the originals and New Vegas, especially New Vegas, which is one of my probably top 10 or 5 favorite games of all time. But yet, it's very likely it's going to be showered upon more in Season 2. And if it does, well, don't be mad at me or claim that I didn't tell, or be mad at me when I say I told you so when people look at Season 2, and hopefully they'll realize it's shit. If it, like, blatantly shits on New Vegas, they'll be like, well, I tried to tell you back when Season 1 came out. And honestly, that's just the end. That's all I really have to say. Like, I hope you really enjoyed these videos, because I did put a lot of effort into them, and I'm just glad you watched them, especially if you watched them all the way through to the end. And I appreciate you watching this with me, and don't think this is going to be the end. Like, I am probably going to break down the show's lore when Season 2 comes out, no matter how well received it is. Because I just love Fallout that much. Even if, let's say, I don't love every single aspect of it. Even if I'm not apparently a true Fallout fan, because I don't like every single thing that's thrown my way. Well, that's all for now. This is Skids, signing off.